Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we're all about helping healthcare professionals like you create positive change at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we bring you new insights for a new year. And so I'm super excited for us to round out this January, February, beginning of our podcast for 2025 with Gillian Faith, one of our executive coaches. She and I coach different perspectives for leaders at the division chief, chair, department, system leads in all different types of disciplines, including HR and also clinical groups. And so we actually want to have a podcast episode just about a new year and what it's like to take a new leadership position. So we know that new positions and new promotions are always exciting and also very scary times. And so, Gillian, I'm wondering, what's a common challenge that you often see in your clients when they take on a new position?
Yeah, good question, Lily. And I think what you said is exciting and scary at the same time. One of the things that I do see consistently is a lack of confidence in leadership capabilities. We have many really experienced and skilled clinicians, but when it comes to leadership, it's a whole different set of skills. And some people have natural leadership tendencies, and that's really great, but it can still be daunting leading a division or a department or a hospital and have multiple conflicting pressures coming from different directions and being able to handle all that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think it's even if they don't necessarily feel like they have the confidence or they do have the confidence, what they start to realize very rapidly within a few weeks is that it's a whole new ballgame. There's all kinds of meetings that you were unaware were happening all the time at work that you now need to be a part of. And they actually care about your opinion. And you're not quite sure who the stakeholders are for who to negotiate with and who to get on your side. And it's really hard to know what the right answer is when it's so complicated. Some of the challenges and the discussion that you're brought into regarding much broader perspectives, not the individual perspective. I'm curious, in relation to these new areas where you need to gain rapid confidence, what are some of the other problems that come up because of that?
I think how you show up as a leader. Some people are not aware of how they come across in a leadership role. The communication becomes extremely important, and depending on the situation, it can be difficult to get the communication right. And people look to the leaders for answers, and sometimes you have the answers and sometimes you don't. And if you don't have the answers, how are you going to handle that? How are you going to get people's opinions and make decisions and make the right decisions?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What are some of the communication challenges or tips that you often work with your clients on?
I think sometimes people don't understand how they actually show up as a leader. They think they know, or they know what they want to achieve, but it's not always what is real. And dealing with conflict, dealing with multiple different opinions.
I totally agree. When you're sitting in these rooms and you have differing opinions and you're trying to actually make a decision, the question is, when do you table it and when do you continue the conversation? And when can you have enough emotional intelligence live in the moment and handle yourself and also handle others is really a hard space. I think clinically, we often are so focused on helping the patient or helping the family that we can actually hold our own emotions. But when we're part of the team trying to make a decision together, we get sucked into those emotions too.
Yeah, it can be really hard, and that can be the stuff that keeps you up at night. And we all need a good night's sleep in order to come back and get right back at it the next day. Yeah, absolutely. Dealing with conflicting opinions, different personalities, and being able to take command, having executive presence, allowing people to feel like they've been heard in situations where that's important. And some of the decisions are high stakes. There's a lot riding on many decisions that are made in healthcare.
Yeah. Funny you say that, because I actually was just realizing we make high stakes decisions all the time. We're there in the moment in the operating room or in the ER, in the ICU. But then I started to realize what you're talking about is also it feels high stakes because they're downstream effects that as you implement a project or a decision or a policy, into action. There actually may be unintended consequences. And also, how do you backpedal? For example, once you begin a project, you make a decision unilaterally about particular either access to care or opening a new service line or changing policy on something that's already in existence. People don't like change. Your teams
Right.
below you don't like change at all. And there's going to be a lot of complaining along the way. And so the question is, how do you make that with enough stakeholders that they feel that they're part of the decisions in general?
Yeah, change management and leading through change is a big deal for clinical and healthcare executives. As you say, there's always going to be somebody that's not happy. And how do you find your champions and how do you help move the decisions forward, knowing that everybody may not be on board? And I guess you're right. Your high stakes decision as a physician and ICU, ER, OR, different kind of high stakes decisions. So hear what you're saying. Absolutely, you've got lives on the line, and so it's all a bit different.
And it feels funny because it's one of those things for many of my clients, they're like, it's so much easier just to run a resuscitation than it is to sit in these complicated boardrooms where both your team, your clinical team, people below you, people multiple professions, and the people above you also trying to decide how are we going to fix this problem of revenue loss or staffing challenges or supply chain issues or drug recalls. And it's just sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. It's actually easier just to take care of one patient at a time.
That's interesting.
I'm wondering, I think the biggest thing a lot of my clients see is how do you handle in a room so many different opinions when you feel the pressure internally to actually make a decision this meeting? Like we have to have an answer. And yet there's so much discrepancy in the room for what to do next. It's often a challenge that my clients come to me with. I'm curious to pick your brain and think through what kinds of tips might you offer someone?
One of the things I would say is to be prepared when you're entering a meeting or a negotiation like that. If you know what you want your outcome to be and you know what you're willing to settle for or not, then that is a really helpful first step. And like you say, when you're in these situations and people are getting annoyed and there's disagreement and lack of consensus, it can be really hard to navigate.
Yeah. I think for me, I always try to remind my clients to also be more open minded and expansive than you can imagine. That a lot of times we are always told, this is how you do it, or this is how you structure the workload, this is how you make the schedule. And instead, when you really are in a new situation, when you can't do the old way, how do you bring some renewal? And I think it's really hard sometimes encouraging your team to, okay, let's really think out of the box, like literally implode it, destroy it, and come back with, if you had your dream, what could it look like? And there's always crickets in the room. There's always silence after a leader says that because you start to really realize how entrenched, even for mid-level managers or other people who are in leadership or even the front lines who are like, they're down in the dirt making the schedule. They're like, this is how we've always done it. And there's some comfort in the ways of that old regimented thinking, but new problems deserve new thinking. And I think what's strange is that people often have to slow down that conversation to be able to tell people, we need to really brainstorm like we're a kid drawing things out for the very first time. And it doesn't feel very good when you feel time pressure to make a decision.
Oh, for sure. When you put the time pressure on top of everything else, it just complicates it even more. And I think what you're referring to is the group think situation where people just sometimes are afraid to speak up because they feel like they're going to be shot down or they don't know how to think outside of what the norm has been. So there's different ways that we can approach that. There's different ways that we can run these kinds of meetings that help them become more innovative and less of this is how we've always done it.
Tell me more about that. Tell me about what are some good practices or how you should structure meetings.
So it depends on the situation, right? There's lots of different situations. Sometimes we have to get people out of the room and we have to bring in different tools and different exercises to spark some creative thinking. And then we come back and we share in different ways so that it helps everybody have a voice because sometimes we've got quiet people who actually have really important and relevant things to say. but maybe don't feel like they can speak up, or maybe feel like their answer or their suggestions is not very viable. So there's a few different things we can do depending on the situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because sometimes meetings are totally in person, sometimes they're hybrid, and then sometimes they're all via email. You have a terrible email chain that just goes on, and yet they also build off of each other. I just think of some of the discussions I've seen where different people bring up different perspectives via the email chain. And when there's a deadline set for that email chain, please use this thread to review the content and let me know which way we think the policy should change. And then that discussion thread is helpful because you see different perspectives, and everyone has a chance to be able to contribute. Like you're saying, the more introverted or the more thoughtful, they have some time to really digest and then re-give the option, as compared to in-person meetings where you can actually, people break up into smaller groups where you can take different parts of the question and give structure to the question formation so that the brainstorming can occur in different buckets, so that when they're all put back up on the wall with their post-it notes, or you bring some other kind of like fancy digital way to collate all of the responses, that you then have gotten smaller groups is a little bit less intimidating to share ideas. So I totally hear you. When there's different meetings means different ways of handling that.
Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering, how can working with a coach help a new leader?
So one of the ways that coaching really makes an impact is that coaches provide a confidential space so that as a new leader, you can talk through your most important issues, your opportunities, whatever it is you're working on. You can work with your coach on things like, if there's a block, you may have a block in the way you're thinking, you may feel stuck. You may have a limiting belief in what's possible or what you are actually able to do. So a coach can help work through some of these things and can open up the space for more creative, innovative thinking and help you process through some of the more troubling things that may be happening in your work life.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those things. I feel like we get this question a lot, don't we, in terms of how exactly do you help me? And I would also say that the way you show up to work requires so much higher a performance, because you are managing teams and projects and also the front lines all simultaneously, while still trying to be your own human self and also manage your own personal work life that never seems to turn off. And so I think the greatest fear I see often in leaders at the hospital system level is the fact that they're afraid that there isn't going to be boundaries anymore, that the stakes are so high now that actually you do have to sacrifice your family time or your personal time to do that. And it's a myth. It's a normal fear. It's a healthy, rational fear, because there's always a choice. There's always a choice that you can create structures where you are on 24/7 and everyone knows that they can basically reach you via the cell phone. I know a leader who is call me anytime. And yet at the same instance, most people won't unless they absolutely have to. And also if you have safeguards and expectations for all of the people in a circular fashion around you to somehow protect you and be empowered to know how we're going to handle hypothetically certain situations, you can empower a whole team of people to be able to respond in the same. So we're all responding the same way to the same challenges, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, what kind of advice would you have about the aspect about the difficult conversations and the giving feedback? Because I know a lot of times we don't really want to say these things, and yet it's really important that we do say this in a safe, formative way, and also set boundaries so that if someone's not meeting expectations, that there are consequences.
Yeah, one of the first things that I would ask myself is this feedback that has to be given. If I give the feedback, will it help this person either grow or do the right thing in whatever the situation is? And if I don't give it, will there be a negative impact to the person, the patient they're treating, whatever it is? So first of all, if you ask yourself those questions, because sometimes people give feedback that's not really helpful. So it should always be given from the approach of that you're trying to help the situation or the person do better or achieve more, whatever it is. In terms of how to give the feedback, having a little structure helps. And if we can think of the situation, the behavior and the impact, that often helps. Just very simply put a little framework there and it makes it easier to deliver the feedback.
Yeah. No, I really like that. Having some structure and framework and just more objective that really is more
Right.
neutral, as least emotional as possible. A lot of times also for really difficult conversations is starting to giving the feedback is to warn the person and also being curious. I have found
Yeah.
that what we teach for the feedback is
Mhm.
being really curious about where the person who you're about to get feedback from, how they thought things went, or what was running through their mind, or what worries they might have for the encounter, the situation, the meeting, etc. Because
Yeah.
what's amazing to me whenever I ask, and even in my clinical learning debriefing or any kind of time I have to give feedback, the person themselves actually knows where the problem is. And so
Right.
the gap analysis with the person is actually already there. The problem is they don't know who to tell and they don't know how to get help for it.
Yeah. So as we know, as coaches, being curious is very important. And we always try and teach other people to have more curiosity when they're leading, when they're in leadership positions, because it can really help the relationship and it can help the understanding. And in situations like you say, just being curious, as you say, the other person quite often knows where the issue is.
Yeah. And so with all of this curiosity and awareness and knowing the many different perspectives you often get in the room, we often have to become more self-aware ourselves and have better emotional intelligence. Can you tell us a little bit about what is emotional intelligence and positive
Mhm.
intelligence and things like that? What does all of that sort of lingo mean for healthcare
Yeah.
leaders?
Emotional intelligence is knowing how you show up and also how you read the room and read people and how you respond to different emotions. And some people naturally seem to have more emotional intelligence than others, but I have been told that you can learn it. And I do believe that. And as coaches, we can actually help people improve emotional intelligence. And there's quite a lot written on leadership and emotional intelligence. And some of the most successful leaders have higher levels of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Positive intelligence, on the other hand, is something slightly different. And that's all about improving relationship, being, and performance. And they talk about saboteurs and saboteurs that have helped you become successful in the first place, like being a high achiever. But in some instances, it holds you back. And it's having the awareness and being able to identify when things are being overused or being underused. And as coaches, having information and having the awareness is huge. And we do that through different assessments. And our energy leadership assessment is another example of that. It helps us look at how they present when they're performing at their best and also under stress. And we help to look at the gaps and see how we can coach people to actually be in those higher levels.
That's really great. That's a really great overview of emotional intelligence, positive intelligence, and energy leadership. So the three big major buckets that we often work with our clients with in executive leadership, because there's so many things that can cause a lot of negative and catabolic either energy and also emotions in the different situations we're encountering. And so it's really important to be aware of ourselves and also to understand in all the people we're working with where they're coming from. And
Right.
the more neutral and the more aware all leaders are, you can take a step back and try to solve the problem in a more constructive, neutral way rather than an angry, reactive,
Right.
victim kind of mode. And awareness being the largest piece for the emotional intelligence for what this problem means and what's at stake for different individuals. And also understanding that when you're in that feeling mode, none of us are making great decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's also contagious. I think the part about energy leadership and emotional intelligence, how they relate to me at least, is once you're in emotional states, it feeds off of each other. How often have we had a team or a group of one or two people who are highly catabolic and negative in their emotions for whatever reason, whether it be personal or their trauma response or just the way they see the world, instead of it ever being a constructive way for the whole team, they actually start infecting almost the rest of the group. And then we're dealing with a boulder. We're trying to then change something that's probably unchangeable without a serious intervention, which then is often where sometimes our clients come to us. We're like, we have this insurmountable issue and we're not sure where to begin. I need some help. And so sometimes they reach out for coaching because they're like, I have lots of resources. I want to try to make this better. And I don't know where to begin. I'm aware, but I don't know where to begin helping people.
And I talk about the ripple effect, and especially in leadership positions, how we show up every day, that trickles down into all the team members. So we can quickly lift and influence team members, and we can also very quickly do the opposite depending on how we show up.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I also think it's not just in the big rooms, it's also in the elevators, it's in the sidebar, it's in the cafeteria, it's in those walk rounds. It really is in these one-on-one moments too, where you also have the opportunity just to be a good, normal, authentic person so that you can be relatable. Because what's amazing is I still think of some of, like in my mind, those moments throughout the pandemic where C-suite executives came out of the C-suite in the pandemic to actually be out there walking through constantly. And walk rounds has been shown to increase relatability of sort of the hospital, the policy, and the administration with the front lines, because just knowing that everyone everywhere is proud to be representing that hospital in the system and see what's really happening in the little nooks and crannies, right? Even in the funny little waiting rooms or just the welcome areas or the info desk is important for everyone to see.
And that comes down to trust and respect, which is huge in leadership. Walking around helps in those situations that are very stressful and there's lots of emotions involved. I'm sure the leaders really gained some respect during those times.
Yeah. And whenever I bring this up to some of my clients, they're like, when am I going to have the time to do this? Look at my schedule. Look at all these meetings. And I also say, you know what? You probably should be running only 45 or 50-minute meetings. You have 10 minutes to go walk around. You should be walking around anyways, because it's good for you to take a break, clear out, and come back and sit back down again. And so I think it's really being really intentional with the time that you have. So if you are working from 7 to 5, for example, inside a building, that where can you find opportunities to double dip your time so that you're getting some health benefits out of it, clearing your mind, maybe doing a 30-second meditation while you're just going up and down the stairs, and then also being the face and going out and saying hello to one or two people in the building and doing those walk arounds, because often it just takes 5 minutes in the elevator and seeing the people so that you can actually leverage your time more wisely.
Yeah, those little details definitely count.
Yeah. Another question we often get asked is, if you're new to a leadership position this year and you want to work with a coach, how do you find the right coach and what should you be looking for? And how do you know when the right time is? Or I'm just curious what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, as coaches, we are all trained, and technically we can coach any person anytime about anything. And I think that's true in a lot of situations. When you're looking to work with a coach, it's really important to have a discovery call, because the chemistry has to be right. Just like in any other relationship, you have to get along, and hopefully the coach is bringing something to the relationship that is relevant to what you're looking for. Hopefully, if you're a leader, your coach has some background in leadership or experiences and perspectives that they can draw from, because I think that really helps in a coaching relationship if you can really understand. And in healthcare, it's a very different, specialized environment everybody's working in. Transforming healthcare, we are all either practicing clinicians or prior clinicians. So we also bring that added understanding of healthcare and the complexities that go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, I think, one of those things where it's really hard to find someone who you think you can trust in the moment. And it really does require just slowing down the conversation and just chatting to see what are the perspectives. And most of us really will help first. Really, what kinds of things are your struggles and how can we think about these things differently? And how can we brainstorm? And hopefully, the biggest thing is being held accountable. A lot of people come to us when they realize I actually perform better when I have a guide on the side. So if you have a chef or a personal trainer or someone who literally sort of forces you every week to be the best version of you, you don't let other people down. I think in the service industry, like healthcare, we don't let other people down. And so when you work with a coach, you actually don't want to let that coaching relationship down. Right. And it's like a commitment to, I want to be my better version of myself. And it honestly makes my life easier because I know that I have someone who I can email at any time, text at any time. And then we have structured times where we can actually take a deeper dive, deconstruct why did that go wrong? and where can I do something differently for the future? And knowing that it's probably going to happen again that week, right? Because most of us has recurring projects and recurring meetings and recurring opportunities to repair, remend, get additional buy-in, and move things forward incrementally.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we can get in our own way. We sometimes feel like we have to do everything, and we get stressed if we don't actually personally take care of things. And sometimes things don't always have to be done by us, that we can delegate. A lot of people have a problem delegating, and especially in new leadership positions. And some things can be delegated, some things can't. But I know people struggle with that as well. But sometimes our own beliefs and our own mindset can hold us back as well.
Yeah, that is so true. Both between the small delegation tests of change and then also the growth, the mindset where you almost self-defeat yourself before you even start. Just so you can put it on the possibility list. Yeah. And so I guess what's one or two takeaways that you'd like to end this podcast today? If you had any tips or advice to all our new leaders for 2025?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm talking from experience here, I was a young leader and assumed the responsibility of a division in my early professional years. And it definitely did keep me up at night sometimes. I definitely had anxiety on a Monday morning. So if that's you, if you are finding that you're overloaded or you're hoping that you won't become burnt out because of everything that you're dealing with, reach out and just have a conversation with us. And we will let you know if we think we can help. And there's so much you can do in a coaching relationship. There's so much to achieve. And some people say that the only thing that they did wrong is they didn't get a coach earlier. They waited too long. Just some things to think about. How about you, Lily? What do you think?
It's funny because I actually wonder how different things might have been if I actually had a coach back when I had certain positions, because it did feel overwhelming because there was just so much data and so much information that I had to collate. And I'm really grateful for the team I had with me in terms of their abilities to actually help me represent things accurately. And I think for me also, just knowing when to speak up and knowing who can be allies was also very challenging. So just having someone, like a guide on the side, having a confidant that you can actually talk to about these things so that you can keep a running list of which projects probably take more priority than less, because it became overwhelming because there were so many things to fix. For anyone who's in a department level recognizes that if you're a department or division or even the whole system or hospital, there's just so many different projects that are simultaneously open. And the question is finding who's going to help on what priority, so it doesn't become overwhelming for them, because the deadlines are the deadlines for reports and fiscal year and things like that. Is how to support people very close to you to be able to help you. But it's really was via trial and error. And I wish now, looking back, that I had someone to help get me organized so that I could have been not spinning my wheels for 3 months before I started to understand this is the new rhythm. So that's a very long-winded to say, I guess, for both of us, that just having a coach for a couple months is really helpful because it starts to really focus you into what you need to get done, and it helps you become more productive. And when you become more productive, that means you actually get more time with your family and doing other things and hobbies and health. And I know a lot of executives start laughing whenever we talk about that. Self-care, what is that?
And yep, very important.
Yes, very important. So it was really wonderful having this chat with you in the new year, Gillian. And we both look forward to, if you want to keep in contact with us, if you want to hear different things on the podcast, please email podcast@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And if you would like a free discovery call with either myself or Gillian, email us at hello@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share with a colleague who would benefit. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Ready to take your healthcare leadership journey to the next level? Book a discovery call free at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to explore our personalized coaching packages designed specifically for healthcare professionals like you.